Hi, I'm Patrick Cobb with AARP South Carolina. AARP South Carolina is pleased to sponsor the Post and Courier's Pints and Politics series. AARP is a nonpartisan organization. We don't endorse candidates nor parties. We work on issues important for families 50 plus in South Carolina. Follow us at aarp.org/SC.
Can you hear me now? Hey. Hi, everybody. I'm Autumn Phillips. I'm the editor of the Post and Courier. Welcome to, thank you. Welcome to an in-person Pints and Politics after, a year and a half of doing them virtually. We're still limiting attendance to 75 people, so these are our 75 of our most loyal Pints and Politics fans. But we also have, it's being recorded, so we have a virtual audience. And then if you want to share this out, if you signed up for a ticket, you'll get an email with a link to the video so that you can post that or share that to whoever you want. Let's see. Before we get started, I always want to thank Palmetto Brewing Company. They've always been huge supporters of us, of Pints and Politics. We've been here many, many, many times, even virtually, and we appreciate it. And then South Carolina AARP has been our sponsor of this event, making sure that we can afford to do this for 2 years running. Thanks to them. And tonight, our guest is Bakari Sellers, who has been, you'll hear the stories, who has been involved in politics in one way or another in South Carolina, really, his whole life. Here to interview him is Skylar Croft, our politics editor. He's been covering politics in South Carolina for more than 30 years. And Tom Novelli, who covers, yes. Oh, now it's competing on who gets the most applause. He's our military and politics reporter. I'm going to turn it over to them. Again, thank you for being here, gentlemen.
Thank you all very much for coming. I hope you can hear me. I'm speaking into this correctly, but let me do a brief introduction. Most of all, everyone here has seen Bakari from his time on CNN, but he's also had been an attorney with some significant cases. He ran for statewide office against Henry McMaster.
But how did that end up in my introduction?
But I think what stands out most of all is that at age 22, he was elected to the South Carolina State House. I think when I was 22, I might have still been tailgating at the time, so there's a kind of a young doer back then, too. But we always start off Pints and Politics with kind of a first entry question, and since we are in a brew pub, are you a beer drinker, and do you have a favorite South Carolina brewed flavor of beer that you prefer? And we are at Palmetto, but that's just up to you.
Although I was elected at 22, when I was 22, I was also still tailgating. The funny story, I don't know if you all recall the former ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, but one of her most legendary nicknames prior to the Trump years, we didn't really have nicknames, was from my former seatmate, Boyd Brown. When I was 21, 22, I had just gotten elected. I served 2 years, and then this young guy got elected named Boyd Brown, and then he was the youngest member. And Boyd had this unique, uncanny ability to say whatever came to his mind. And he was always very antagonistic to the governor. So she one day in a press conference called him the mayor of 5 Points, which was a legendary nickname. And I'm just glad because every night that Boyd was in 5 Points, I was there too. But I didn't get a nickname. My favorite beer is White Zombie, which is a very good wheat beer. I don't drink a lot of beers, but I drink a lot of wheat beers. I'm trying to have a more sophisticated palate, so a lot of tequila and red wine.
Yeah. I will back you up on the wheat beer.
I don't like the judgment I heard from this crowd when I said tequila.
The wheat beer is almost like a food. It's a dessert.
Exactly, exactly, for sure.
All right, well, let's go back in time about 3 weeks to what happened in Virginia and nearly in New Jersey. Did not bode well for the Democrats. Only years passed by since Donald Trump left, Joe Biden came in. Is the pendulum always already swinging back? Or was the Virginia results the fact that Donald Trump was not on the ballot but an acceptable Republican was?
That's a big question. I think that Virginia and New Jersey were a lot of everything that you named. One of the things that I said about Virginia in particular was that Lee Atwater would have been extremely proud of the way that the Republican Party used identity politics. And it's weird because Democrats always get blamed for identity politics, but I was looking at a stat this morning that about 33 to 40% of everything that was on Fox News prior to the Virginia election centered around critical race theory. It apparently disappeared because that number is less than 1% today. There's no more conversation about it, and it was used to drive up and gin up a lot of support. But when you also look at New Jersey, you can't just blame it on that one thing. So I think you have two parties that are having a really weird Trump problem. The Republican Party is attempting to figure out how they run without Trump, but still have his base. And Glenn Youngkin was a perfect embodiment of that. And Democrats, every third word is Donald Trump. And people are like, well, Trump ain't on the ballot, so why should I vote for you? And there was a unique inability for Democrats to get anything done in Washington, D.C., and so they looked relatively inept. And that ineptness, I think, trickled down onto Terry McAuliffe and many others. And so I think it was this huge, Trump still played a huge role, but that's the lingering question that you have. I think Democrats are going to lose the House of Representatives going forward. I think the question is by how much. I think you'll have a Speaker McCarthy for sure. And I think the Senate is going to be extremely, extremely close. That's going to be where the races are played out, and people have to answer the question. Glenn Youngkin is fascinating, and a lot of people don't know this. Glenn Youngkin was able to be the nominee because he did not have a true primary. There is a question whether or not someone who wasn't a Trump Republican could win, but for the convention process that was Virginia. And so there are a lot of layers to it. At the end of the day, Democrats have to do a much, much, much better job of giving people a reason to vote for them. And they failed at that prior to about last Friday.
We're seeing this week especially, there were several announcements of senior Democrats opting not to seek re-election.
G.K. Butterfield just resigned a moment ago.
Are they tired, or they see the writing on the wall, or is it just they want to make room for someone else? Or what's going to happen to the Democrat majority, especially if they lose the House?
Did Jim Clyburn retire?
Jim has not.
I didn't know if I missed that. That would have been exciting for me. Nobody got that out there, so we're gonna blow over that. I think a lot of people are, tired of being an elected official in Washington, D.C. It really looks like it sucks. I mean, I don't know if you all saw today, I had to watch, I don't know how many of you all watched the debate over the censure of Paul Gosar. Like, I was on TV immediately after that. I was on TV from the hotel down the street I think we got done at like 3, I was on from like, the debate got over at like 3:50 and we gave this immediate analysis. But just listening to the debate, I mean, they were arguing over the fact that Paul Gosar put up an anime cartoon where it killed one of his colleagues and threatened to kill the president of the United States. And we have inflation, we have climate change, we have all of these things to deal with, but we have to deal with that issue in the United States Congress. And we spent an hour and a half doing it today. And so I think it's a combination of the fact that Democrats know the writing's on the wall. And part of the reason that writing is on the wall has to do with the fact that we've lost so much ground in state legislatures. And I'm not telling you this because I am a former member, but the most important races you have in the entire country are your state house races. Point blank, period. Because they literally control the center of gravity for the direction of the country. The individuals who draw the lines for your United States Congress are in your state House of Representatives. And I think, and I've always said this, that the primary threat to democracy is not disinformation or misinformation. The primary threat to democracy is not QAnon or anything that anybody can say on the right or left. The primary threat to democracy is gerrymandering. And I know that's not the sexiest issue, so let me explain to you why. Every 10 years, Republicans and members of black caucuses make an unholy alliance whereby you have Republicans seed as many black voters as they possibly can, and black legislators taking those members into their district, preventing competitive seats elsewhere in the state. And so, I think if the 6th congressional district was, say, 40% black, then you have a competitive 2nd and 5th. You have a 1st that's probably a Democrat. So those are the type of things that I think, and now individuals don't even have to play to the center, because in this country, the little known dirty secret is you only have to win a primary. You don't even have to win a general election anymore. Every race in South Carolina but this one is a primary. I mean, it's not even, if you win the 6th district Democratic primary, you know what they call you? Congressman. If you win the 2nd or 3rd or 4th Republican primary, you're a congressman. If you win the 5th, it's a little closer, but still, I mean, it's a tough one. So those are some of the underpinnings of democracy that I think we have to deal with.
Kind of related to what you said earlier, that Trump is an issue both on the left and the right. I feel like we can't talk about this without January 6th, for example. I feel like that's a similar topic where, overall, why hasn't there been more outrage from the right or left over the Capitol riot and insurrection? It seems that as soon as Biden was elected, he became a GOP focus, and that the Republicans have so far shut down a pretty credible examination of what happened.
So I'm not going to answer your question because I have another, and it's because it's not an article you're writing. I think I can do that. So, I would say this. I compared January 6th to Charlottesville. And for me, there's been this really weird, and somebody has to help me explain this, nexus. There's been this really weird nexus between anti-Semitism and racism. And when you look in Charlottesville, what's the thing that surprised you all the most? You can answer.
The death count wasn't higher.
That's actually unique.
No, I was going to say the same thing. And then also, I think just overall, it wasn't played on the media for as long.
Well, in Charlottesville, what surprised me the most is they didn't wear hoods. Nobody covered their face. They were unashamed in their bigotry, racism, and anti-Semitism. It was the same thing that happened in January 6th. I remember, I say this with some youthful naivete, but I'm young enough to remember when being anti-Semitic and racist wasn't cool. But yet, that was now an accepted part of society. There was a dude who came in from Maryland who still had his lanyard on from work. He came on lunch to storm the Capitol. And so there is something that's wrong in our society. And yes, I think there has to be an investigation into the members of Congress who knew about it, who were accepting. But deep down inside, there's also something cultural that's happening. And we are allowing hate to be pervasive in our communities. Now, has it always existed? The answer is yes. But now it wears Brooks Brothers shirts. It has nightly TV shows. I mean, it's in pulpits. I listened to a pastor the other day. I can't remember his name. He's a famous right-wing pastor, but in the church, they were chanting, "Let's go, Brandon." Right? And so, which for those of you all who don't know, that means F you Biden, right? In church. And so I think that there is a tone and tenor that requires an aggressive unifier, if that makes sense. And I'm just not sure that any side has that just yet.
I have to adjust now. This is our SCAARP is one of our sponsors, and this is a question for you. As a former legislator, what do you see as the pros and cons of expanding Medicaid in South Carolina? I think I have your answer.
There are no cons. I mean, I think that my favorite constituent, well, not of all time, because my mom would be upset, but one of my favorite constituents ever is in the room, Miss Lee Early. Her husband's okay, but she was definitely one of my favorite constituents. You're okay, Jack, but I liked your wife better. And She's been a pillar of Bamberg County for a very long period of time. And I think uniquely enough, our story is one where, and Dr. Pendarvis knows this, where when we don't have access to quality care, when your hospital shuts down, the impact it has on your entire community. Rural healthcare in the state of South Carolina is in shambles. And for us, it's an access to care issue. When you have hospitals that are closing from Chesterfield to Bamberg, et cetera, people don't understand the economic impact that has. Not just the impact on healthcare, but Bamberg County Hospital, it was one of our largest employers, wasn't it? And then not only that, but around that you had the flower shop, you had the pharmacy. I mean, you had a vibrant downtown with a couple of restaurants or fast food joints, and all of that stuff leaves when your hospital leaves. And so I think that very indicative of South Carolina politics, we nationalized. There is absolutely no reason for South Carolina to not expand Medicaid. If Nikki Haley would have expanded Medicaid, she would not have lost any ground with her base. And I think she actually would have better served her base, because the people who are suffering the most right now are poor white folk. I mean, if we're going to have an honest conversation. And so expanding Medicaid is something that Vincent said he would do if he was governor first day, and I wish Henry would do, regardless of politics. I know Mia and Joe both say they'll do it, but we have to remove and it adds 400,000 jobs or something like that, and billions of dollars to our economy. I mean, it's maybe 40,000 jobs and billions of dollars to our economy. I mean, it's a easy yes. I don't see any downside to it.
Let's talk a little bit about CNN, where you're frequently on TV there. Things seem to run pretty smooth, especially on election nights. There's not a lot of interruptions or people talking over each other in an age where crosstalk and being outrageous usually sells and people pay attention to it. So our question is just what isn't the viewing public? What are we not seeing during the broadcast?
A lot of crosstalk? No. We spend a lot of time in preparation. On big election nights, we have meetings I think we go in at like 4, maybe a little earlier. My shift is usually the 4 to 7 shift. Van comes on from about 7 to 12, and then I come on from 12 until whatever. Just recently in Virginia, I was on from 12 to like 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, which is tough because, that's not natural. So and I have twins, so I usually treat it like I'm a professional athlete. Like I go work out, I get a meal, and I take a nap. So I don't know what's going on during the first part of when polls close, because you know what doesn't happen? Nobody knows what's going on when polls close. I usually wake up about 9:30 or 10, and then get ready to go to the studio. And that's just what you do. You go in, and part of the thing people don't necessarily understand is that when you go on TV, especially on nights like that, you have 1 million people, or like our Super Bowl is election night, and you'll have 30 million people watching, right? And the lights are so bright. And John King is just on his game. I mean, John King knows the precincts in Allendale County. Like, it's the most fascinating thing ever. He's just pointing them out. And he knows everything in Ohio, right? And the board is just flipping. Your eyes are this big. You're going through your notebook. We get notebooks that are this thick. We know the rules in every state. We flip through it. I can tell you what happened in the last 10 presidential elections, and I'm going through it. So when I make this random comparison, this election is analogous to when H.W. Bush and Dan Quayle, I mean, that's because you studied, right? And you're going through it. And so there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. And then we just have great hosts that kind of keep it smooth throughout the night. But we attempt to, and one of the things no one attempts to do on that level is no one tries to go viral. A lot of people, when they get on TV, they kind of force these viral moments. But I always tell individuals who it's their first time on TV, that's the last thing you should do is try to be viral. Sometimes you'll be viral when you don't want to, by accident. Or sometimes you'll go out there and just say what your heart feels, and it will be a good moment. But we try to give viewers good TV on election night.
Yeah.
You got to use your microphone.
Microphone. That's a TV thing.
As
I
a
guess.
TV person, I could say you got to actually speak it to the mic.
You mentioned John King. in addition to him, or you can center on him, who on the show are you most impressed with in terms of their communication skills and their sourcing combined together? Who really has got it?
Well, listen, David Axelrod is one of the smartest people I've ever been around in my life. David Axelrod was a journalist in Chicago, Chicago Sun. He worked his way up. He worked for Harold Washington, who was the first black mayor, got into politics. David Axelrod is utterly brilliant. Abby Phillip, who was a colleague of mine who just, I think she's either back or on her way back from maternity leave. People have seen her star rise. Gloria Borger Gloria is so funny and kind. Whenever you ask Gloria, how are you doing, she answers the question one way. Never better. That is what she says. Each time the world could be falling down around her, she's fascinating. Wolf Blitzer is the literally nicest person in the world. I will never forget this. The Wizards were playing, I want to say the Cavaliers, but I think it was the Cavaliers. And I was walking with him, talking with him. He said, walk with me. And we have elevator attendants and security now because we have to have security in our building. And he was walking over and he just gave them his 2 season tickets because he wasn't going to the game that night. He gave the elevator. I was like, Wolf, I would have taken them to, I would have been right there in your seats. But Wolf will give you the shirt off of his back. Anderson is extremely smart, kind, and very shy. But he is just and Don is everything you think Don is. Don is brilliant. Don understands the surroundings of what he is and what he stands for. I'm very cognizant of the fact that, but until Joyanne Reed took over that nighttime spot, there were only 2 black primetime anchors in all of TV, Lester Holt and Don Lemon, and he was very, very cognizant of that fact. And we just have, we have a really good team of folk. It's just, it's a good, I would have never guessed coming from Denmark, where Denmark, we got 3,300 people in the city, and that's when Voorhees and Denmark Tech are actually in school, that you'll be speaking in front of so many folk, and it's just a really, really wild, unique experience. And Jake Tapper, I always tell folk, Jake Tapper and Chris Wallace are the best 2 interviewers in all of TV. Chris Wallace, regardless of what you may say or think, or people may say or think, Chris Wallace is a phenomenal interviewer, and Jake Tapper is as well.
Let me ask one more CNN question. Let's talk about your contract. Do you have anything odd in there?
You sound like my wife.
That's unique. Say you only get blue M&Ms in the candy dish, or anything strange like that.
I am the easiest one of them all, by far. I have a special CNN announcement coming out hopefully before the end of the year, so we'll make sure that you all know that. But I will tell you this secret. I got hired not far from here in front of Francis Marion Square. I had just done, right after, it was a Sunday after the Charleston Massacre, I had just done This Week with George Stephanopoulos, but it was hosted by Martha Raddatz. Martha and I were walking to that Starbucks on the corner. A private number called me. It was Rebecca Cutler. And she said, we want to hire you at CNN. And she said, we have $15,000. It was June. They were going to pay me $15,000 for the rest of the year. I said, I'll do it for 50. I said, call me back. And she said, I have $15,000. I said, cool, I'll do it for 35. And she said, I have $15,000. I said, well, that's a deal. So they paid me $15,000 from June of 2015 through the end of that year. I signed another 1-year deal, and then a 2-year deal, and a 2-year deal, and I think I'm in the middle of near the end of the first year of another deal, but I've been there for a long time, and we're doing some other things that are going to come out soon, so I think we're going to be there for a little while longer.
Let's turn the focus away from CNN, and let's talk about your own political future. Clearly, you'd like to be the next congressman from the 6th District.
I've been saying that since I was like 7.
Where's that in your calculation?
You know, one of the things that people, I think, respect about Bakari, even if they don't like it, is that I'm like always honest. And I figure that if I'm honest with myself, then everything else it's easier to sleep. I have really bad anxiety, which I wrote about in my book. And one of the ways I cope with my anxiety is to be honest, because dishonesty is the best way to make sure that your anxiety is on 1,000. I've always dreamed of running for the United States Congress. That's always been my dream. And that is somewhat dissipated over the last few years. I think the Trump years have made that kind of, it doesn't look fun anymore. It doesn't look like you can change people's lives. You know, there's some kind of feeling you get from waiting so long. I think the story is there are a lot of folk who were buried who were waiting on Strom Thurmond to retire. South Carolina is very well known for that. And you say that out of a great deal of respect, right? And so I think that's somewhat of a drag. Where your life is, I have amazing twins. There'll be 3 next year. You want to be with them. Making more money than I've ever made in my life, which is a calculation. Being able to take care of my family and, you know, pay my mom's mortgage and do things like, I mean, you're just doing shit stuff you've always wanted to do with yourself, right? I mean, so those are all calculations that go into that. And then one of the things I've realized is that you don't have to be in elected office to serve people. I think, you know, in my legal career, just a couple of weeks ago, having a huge opportunity to serve individuals right here in this Charleston community and going out and getting a settlement for $88 million for this community and, you know, doing those type of things. So I say that and say, if Congressman Clyburn retired today, would I run for that seat? The answer is probably yes. But it would take me a little bit longer to get to yes than it would have 2 years ago. If it's 2024, like a lot of people think, what will I do? I don't know. My platform is huge. We talk to the world. And as long as I can do some good, I think that's something that we'll look at. Let me also say this. The South Carolina Democratic Party is not in a position for me to run against Tim Scott. It ain't in a position for me to run against Lindsey Graham. It's barely in a position for anybody to run against Henry McMaster. And so I just think that there's a lot of work left to be done before. I don't believe in being political martyrs. I think that we have to do the work on the ground necessary. It took Stacey Abrams 7 years. And people don't even know that. She started her project in 2014. And it's going to take at least that much plus more to get South Carolina where it needs to be.
You previously were a statewide candidate, as we talked about at the beginning, for lieutenant governor against Henry McMaster. What did you learn about campaigning and being a candidate from that?
South Carolina's bigger than people think. Let me tell you what my team did for me one day. One day they had me going from, this is a true story. One day they had me going from, I spoke at the chamber with, I think, is it Hannah Horn? Hannah Horn in Beaufort or Hilton Head chamber, and booked me an event in Pickens. Do y'all know how far that is? I went from Hilton Head, South Carolina. You said 2 hours? No, I went from Hilton Head to Pickens in one day in a car. South Carolina's much bigger. I know where every Zaxby's in South Carolina is because of campaigning. It was surreal, man. I met so many good people. We got 700 and some odd thousand votes. When you think about the people who voted for you, like 700,000 people voted for you. I mean, that's not bad. We raised a lot of money. We did everything we could. It was just it was a tough night. I laugh at my friends at CNN on election nights because I remind them that I worked 18 months to be lieutenant governor, and CNN called our race at 7:01. I said, I want you to know how rude and disrespectful that was. I make that known in every single meeting. I said, my mom couldn't even get to a TV before you called the race in South Carolina.
The Republicans are all Chick-fil-A fans, so you're a Zaxby.
Let me tell you, I'm not as woke as I should be. I like Chick-fil-A too. But do you know how they make their chicken?
I don't eat Chick-fil-A or Zaxby's, just never been there.
I'm curious.
So they actually brine their chicken in pickle juice. That's why it has a flavor. Anyway, that's probably way more than you ever wanted to know. But no, so I running statewide against Henry McMaster was a lot. Henry never came outside. It was one of the best political strategies he ever had. There was a clear distinction between 30-year-old Bakari Sellers and 70-something-year-old Henry McMaster. And the only time he came outside, we debated. And I challenge you all to go watch that debate on SCE TV. It was by far my best moment in politics.
You were in the State House for 8 years.
I'll never go back to the State House.
Well, the follow-up was, did you enjoy it, or is the process frustrating? I think you...
I would never go back to the South Carolina State House. The South Carolina State House has the most amazing, well, it did, have the most amazing people. I mean, we would go to the Ruth Chris bar, and I'd be sitting down with, I don't even know if you can say stuff like this out loud anymore, but I don't care. I would be sitting down with like Rick Quinn and Leon Stavronakis and Jim Merrill, and I would be sitting down on the other side, it'd be Gilda Cobb Hunter, right? And Jerry Govan. And you'd have all of these liberal stalwarts, and you have all of these conservatives, and we would be sitting down and we would be like talking about families and Gamecock football. And like, when you gonna get married, Bakari? I'm gonna get married when Todd Rutherford get married. That's when I'm gonna get married, you know? We would just be having all of these amazing conversations with each other. And it was just a unique opportunity that in politics you don't see a lot of anymore. I mean, I am somebody who is going to be an avid proponent, again, this is me talking too much, being too honest, of Jim Harrison's getting out on parole. I thought his sentence was just exorbitant and silly, right? But he's somebody who gave me, at the age of 24, I was the youngest person they ever put on judiciary. My father was involved in the most heinous crime, one of the most heinous crimes ever in the state of South Carolina, perpetuated against young, unarmed African Americans. And he put the child of that kid, of that man, on judiciary. And so it's just all of these things that we were able to, these relationships. Now, why I don't want to go back is because you want to talk about something that sucks. Being young, black, and a Democrat in the South Carolina State House. You want to talk about never winning anything? And now Republicans don't need Democrats for anything. It's a supermajority. So, I mean, DC doesn't look fun, but neither does the South Carolina State House. So tell Brad I'm not running for the Senate either. He asks me every 4 years.
This is one of our reader-submitted questions.
Sure.
What or who is standing in the way of improving South Carolina schools?
Did y'all hear the question? What or who is standing in the way of improving South Carolina schools? The what is money. The who is the South Carolina Republican Party. I can only be as blunt as possible. I just talked about how much I loved my colleagues in the last breath, and now I'm blaming them for the failures of the public education system because it's true. In South Carolina, schools are funded in three-legged stool. They're funded by local tax, state tax, and federal subsidies. So let's just say when I was in the State House, my school districts were Denmark-Ola, Bamberg-Ehrhardt, Edisto, and Blackville-Hilda. Those were my 4 schools. Bamberg was the only school that had a passing grade. So when people are pushing for school choice, I'm like, well, what really are the choices? You're going to create a scenario where the halves leave. It reminds me eerily reminiscent of white flight after the 54-55 Brown. But in this case, the individuals who have the means to leave will leave. In Blackville, we still had, people don't know this, but did you all know that one of the first school shootings in the history of this country was in Blackville Hilda, South Carolina? One of the reasons that it happened is because it was an open air school. You know what open air means? It means that they have hallways that are outside. You've seen them before. They still have schools like that right now in Blackville. If you go to school in Denmark, the kids still go to school in trailers. I mean, if it rains, they have to walk through the mud to get to their schools. Their infrastructure is falling apart. I mean, these are the conditions that people go to school, and we have not. Now, people would say, Bakari, well, how do you create new funds for these schools? And I say, well, we have to think outside the box. Well, now we're flush with cash. I mean, I think, didn't you all just report we have $1 billion extra? Yeah, with COVID relief, Joe Biden has made South Carolina flush with cash. But I've proposed things like gaming. I proposed things like legalizing medical marijuana. I proposed a lot of things that would bring an influx of cash to this area that we can actually put into our schools. But we have to do something. And until we change, and Molly Spearman was one of the best superintendents of education we had, confined to what she could do.
Talking about 2024, what do you think Joe Biden's going to do? Do you think he's going to seek re-election?
Yes.
Ooh, there we go. So you don't think he's going to go down, say, I beat Trump, this is it?
No.
You think he runs again?
No, I think he runs again. I think Joe Biden runs again, and I think that Donald Trump becomes a detriment to the Republican Party because I think that he announces he does not run again very, very late. And so I think that everybody has to wait and see what's going to happen. The question on the Republican side is then who fills that void? And that's tough. Nikki Haley and Tim Scott can't win a Republican primary. Tom Cotton's extremely scary, but I don't think he can either. Ron DeSantis has to win his reelection, which if the election was today, he would, but it's still a long way away. So I'm not sure who that person is. It definitely won't be Mike Pence. But I'm not sure who that person is on the Republican side, but it gets really, really interesting who the person who will kind of rise up. Chris Christie's running for president now. I don't know if you all have seen that. But he's been on every show. He's on Bill Maher on tomorrow night. I mean, he hasn't missed a show.
The question then is, too, then where does that leave, if you believe Joe Biden's going to run again in 2024, where does that leave Kamala Harris's political future as well?
As vice president.
Staying vice president.
Yeah.
And on your Twitter account, you praise her pretty frequently. You spoke at length about her historic role as vice president. What's your reaction to the news out of CNN this past weekend that she's being sidelined? And
yeah, I went on CNN and I talked about that article, and I had to throw a lot of cold water on it because it was for me it was weird at best that article came out when she had just gotten back from an historic trip to France, where by all accounts it was decently flawless. Now let me just take a step up to a 50,000-foot view. There are a lot of people who are treating Kamala Harris the same way they treated Hillary Clinton. And we have to recognize that. Hillary Clinton, for however you feel about her today, has been taking abuse since 1990. And there's been a consistent effort to chip away and chip away and chip away. And you see that. You see that same thing. Are there mistakes that are made? Of course. But it's I asked somebody the other day, I said, so tell me what you expect out of the vice president. They couldn't answer the question. I was like, tell me what Dan Quayle's expectations were. Or tell me what you wanted Mike Pence to do. How well did Mike Pence do? I said, you're telling me about dysfunction in the vice president's office when they were chanting, hang Mike Pence during the last administration? I just don't understand. Now, if you want to, I think there have to be defined roles. Like Joe Biden, when he was vice president, was given foreign policy and, TARP things that had to get through the Congress. And if you're going to give her voting rights, which she asked for, I also think as President of the United States, you have to lean in on that issue and at least ask that they maybe not get rid of the filibuster, but reform the filibuster so voting rights can pass. The worst thing Democrats are going to do for 2022 is not pass voting rights reform. And I've told Joe Biden that. I've told anybody who will listen that. I mean, the worst thing you're going to do is not. I mean, you haven't passed criminal justice reform or voting rights reform, and to a lot of us that looks funny in the light. And so, what are you going to do about that? And the answer is we're going to get there, but I don't see how we ever get there. You need the microphone, Scott.
Expert. What is your overall impression of the Biden cabinet performance so far?
I like the cabinet. I mean, some of my favorite people are people that we don't even talk about a lot. I love Jennifer Granholm. People are like, why do you like Jennifer Granholm? Just because she's like an amazing human being. I just actually like her. She can never be president. Did you know that? Because she was, of course, born in Canada. But she's just a fascinating human being. I talked to Pete Buttigieg. I love Pete. I love Mayor Pete. We talk now because we're both twin dads. Pete just had twins, and we've both experienced a lot of issue that we've had to overcome. One of his twins was really ill and was in the NICU for a while, and so Pete is fascinating. I've gotten to know Merrick Garland a whole lot. My choice for Attorney General was Doug Jones. But Merrick Garland and I have become extremely close. And but for the leadership of Merrick Garland, the Mother Emanuel settlement never happens. And it's weird because he would never tell you that. He's very reserved. He's a judge. He's very I say that, but Jack Early would actually tell you that. But he's very reserved. He's to himself. He's humble. He's kind, and doesn't really watch what's going on around him. I know those individuals really, really well. Marcia Fudge is just dynamic. But the cabinet has been doing good things. And now they have, I forget how much this infrastructure bill was, $2 trillion, and they'll have Build Back Better, so they'll be out at work.
This certainly seemed to be a theme for the South Carolina Republican Party recently when they held their conference in Myrtle Beach. Do you think Trump's going to run again? Yes, no, or it depends on his legal problems?
I don't ever think it depends on his legal problems. Legal problems have never stopped Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump, I've had clients like Donald Trump who legal problems don't stop them from doing anything. I have a hard time thinking Donald Trump runs for president again. And I think this is an ego thing. And mind you, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or anything like that. But I do believe the fact that he will lose again weighs heavily on his conscience. And losing for him is something that he felt like he beat Hillary Clinton, so there was no Democrat that could beat him. And then Joe Biden did. And I think that, which he still doesn't even acknowledge, I don't think he could handle two of those. And I think he makes that decision extremely late. Extremely late.
Your memoir is entitled My Vanishing Country. I found that interesting because that is also a leading sentiment of the right, that America isn't the America of their past, and the country they knew is vanishing as well. Can you explain to me what that title means to you as a relatively young man?
So My Vanishing Country, it had two meanings to it. One was from a very micro level, which is that if you ride through Allendale, just ride up 321, go through Hampton, Allendale, Bamberg, Barnwell, those country that we used to know is just vanishing before our eyes. I mean, you were talking to me today about this sit-in spot that was in Denmark, and we can remember that Brooker's Hardware is still there, and you still have a Chinese food restaurant that's still there, but if you come through and it's just boarded up, the We Bake is still there, but it's just boarded up. You go down, I mean, one of the more fascinating kind of I guess, sociological experiments is ride down 321. I mean, 321 was the thoroughfare before 95 was built. And you'll go through and you'll see all of those old motels along the side of the road, and you'll see communities, these small towns that were just vanishing before our eyes. And then from a macro level with the election of Donald Trump, I write in the book that, my grandmother would say that you can't fall off the floor, right? Which is probably one of the best sayings that you can ever have when you really think about it. And I was kind of taken aback in 2016 because all of those ideals that we thought we were life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, but even those not so tangible ideals of love, truth, justice, and peace were slipping away before our eyes. And so it just seemed like this country was vanishing. And so those were the micro and macro meanings behind it.
If both sides of the aisle see the country as vanishing, are we doomed, or is this a necessary turbulence we need to take America to wherever it's going to be in the next decade or next 50 years?
No, I don't believe anything we're going through is necessary. However, I mean, I think that we all have to take a pause and take stock of where we are. It's funny because now in this country we celebrate Juneteenth, but nobody wants to allow us to understand or study how we even got there. I mean, it's decently oxymoronic. I have people explaining to me how they don't want their child taught critical race theory, and they don't know what the hell it is. I mean, the first time somebody wants to talk to you about critical race theory, ask them, what is it? The conversation's over. You can move over to what they're doing for Thanksgiving, because the conversation pretty much is just stopped. And we were empathetic a year ago after George Floyd's death. We were having an understanding. We were having uncomfortable conversations. And so, I don't believe we should cancel people. I don't believe that, we have to be too woke or whatever the word is. I don't necessarily ascribe to that. I think that's really a Twitter phenomenon. But I also think that we should know the history of this country. I also think we should know from whence we've come so we understand where we want to go. I don't think anything about this country is irredeemable. I just don't. I mean, my father could have lashed out at this country with righteous anger, but he believed in what Abraham Lincoln called the better angels of our nature, right? But I do believe we have to reimagine what this country looks like, because fundamentally it don't work for everybody. Now, if you're a white male, there's a 90% chance this country is going to work better for you than anybody else. Now, if you're a white gay male, you got to take off some points. And if you're a white woman, then you probably have to take off some points there, because we understand that misogyny is very real. If you're an immigrant, then think about where you are on the totem pole of what is American. I mean, let's just have a very real and refreshing and honest conversation about where we are as a country. Now, does that mean that it's irredeemable? No. We have systems in this country where kids go to school and their heating and air don't work, where people can't drink clean water, where we have a criminal justice system where you can do everything right and still be gunned down and there be no accountability. Climate change even disproportionately affects people of color than anybody else. And let's not even talk about access to capital. The funny thing about Charlottesville is some of those people who were arrested worked at Wells Fargo. So imagine if you were black, Jewish, or gay, or Muslim, going in there trying to get a small business loan, and you were trying to figure out why you couldn't get it. Because your lender was marching in Charlottesville. So I don't care, Skylar, and I said this all the time, I don't care if somebody calls me nigger. That's sensationalized. That's ignorance. I get that all the time. All you got to do is go on my social media feed. But what I do care about are systems of oppression and systemic issues and institutions that we have never reimagined what they should look like. And I don't think government should pick winners and losers, but I do think everybody should have an opportunity to play the game. And right now, people in this country are locked out.
Also, in your book, you talk about the most important date in your life actually occurred before you were born.
Yeah.
And that was when your father was involved in the Orangeburg Massacre. Tell me about your childhood when it came to that. When did you realize that was a significant event in South Carolina history, in your world, in U.S. history? And tell me about some of the people that came in and out of your doors, your phones. How did that work?
Well, my childhood was a little different, I would think. You know, you pick up the phone and it would be like Stokely Carmichael. Or you pick up the phone and it'd be John Lewis. And then your parents are going to the Outer Banks with John Lewis and his wife. And we sitting there and it's me and John Lewis and his wife and we're eating crabs in the Outer Banks and, you know, they're telling stories and they lying to each other. That's what old folk do. They just be lying to each other. Julian Bond is always around. You learn the impact of women in change movements because my daddy always loved Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer. He loved Sarah Mae Fleming. Like these were Septima Clark, Majeska. You could not tell my daddy there were any better educators than Majeska Simpkins and Septima Clark. He absolutely adored them. And so this was all a part of kind of the culture of who you were. Growing up in Denmark, anybody could spank you. Isn't that right, Judge Early? Denmark, when I was growing up, anybody, that's just, you know, we had tracks going down the middle. You were either from Sugar Hill or you were from Sado, right? Or, and that's just, it was just a community. Everybody was related. When I go to Denmark today, everybody in Denmark has a cousin that's on CNN. It's just me, everybody. That is just the community that you were a part of. And so, and then to have your father have that kind of level of je ne sais quoi, it just meant that much more. My mom was a part of the initial class, the desegregated schools at Hamilton High School in Memphis, Tennessee. So when people talk about, oh man, that was in the past, I'm like, no, that's my mama and daddy. So that is the legacy that in South Carolina is unique because you don't have to go far to find somebody who was a part of the reason that we're able to be here today, right? Isn't that right? You're sitting right here with us. We having a beer with you. Like, you don't have to go far. Abe's in here somewhere. Didn't I see Abe? Abe's in the back. You don't have to go far to be able to find somebody that was a part of the reason that you're here. And I think that is what makes South Carolina special.
We talked about this earlier, you were one of the attorneys on the Emanuel settlement with the federal government, saw a historic $88 million settlement with the families and survivors over the failure to stop the Dylann Roof gun sale. In the aftermath, you gave a emotional quote about it. I'd like to read that here. We've given a big FU to white supremacy and racism.
That's the quote you go to. Okay.
We're doing that by building generational wealth in these black communities from one of the most horrific race crimes in the country. Tell me what was going through your head when you said that quote and kind of where that quote came from.
Well, that quote was me being really honest and then realizing that I was talking about a church. So I was like, I can't say F you and then I'm talking about Mother Emanuel. But people understood what I was attempting to say. Dylann Roof actually had 88 on his shoes. 8 is the 8th letter in the alphabet. And people use 88 to mean Hail Hitler. He actually had 88 bullets that he was prepared to use. 88 is a symbol in white supremacist, the world that I didn't even really know existed. It's their favorite number. So if you at work with somebody that got 88 on everything, then you might need to look at them a little different. And so the way it happened, I was sitting with, true story, I was sitting with, at the Charleston Place Hotel. I had the presidential suite because when you have this many personalities, and by that I mean really good lawyers in one room, sometimes you got to pull them aside. That was the room we had to straighten everybody out. But we're sitting in the room, and it's Andy Savage, it's Gerald Malloy, Ronnie Sabb, Carl Pierce, Mullins McLeod. Y'all know I had a lot of personalities in that room. Gedney Howe IV was standing over. Robert Wyndham was in there. and we had $85 million. And Andy Savage looked at me, and Andy said, is the way Andy and Gedney have a unique ability to say, I just need a little bit more. And Andy said, I need $3 million more to make it work. And so I went outside and called my friends at the government. I said, so we didn't intend to land on 88, but then we did. And so we settled the case, and the next morning, Gerald says, I couldn't sleep at night. I was like, why? You just got $88 million. This is the biggest civil rights case. He was like, because this. And I said, I forgot that. And he said, what do you want to do? He said, well, of course, you know what I want to do as a trial lawyer. I'm going to go over there and ask them for $1 million more, so it's not 88. And they're like, no, we can't do that. And I prayed about it for a little while. And I said, you know what, just F that. We're going to own this. And we're going to take this number and this money, and we're going to create wealth in black communities throughout Charleston, right? So he wanted to start a race war, but instead Polly Shepard and Felicia Sanders and the Sanders family and the Middleton family and the Hurd family and every single family that went through all of this, they're now millionaires, and it will never bring their loved ones back, but it will be able to plant the seed for generations to come. And so all I tried to do was the best that we could, and I think we did that.
We're getting near the end, but I want to ask this question. So you're a hemp farmer.
I actually go weed too, but
Yeah.
go ahead.
How's that going for you? Where's your fields, and where do you see that ending up?
So I have a hemp license in South Carolina, and it's really expensive, and it's very difficult to grow. We have our license is for a property in Hampton that is just, it's a very huge investment, and what you've seen is that a lot of people throughout the state have not been successful with hemp. It's taking us a little bit more time than we thought. I do grow, to the chagrin of some people in this room who will lecture me and probably spank me about it later, but I do have a manufacturing operation in Oklahoma where we grow about 40 to 50 pounds of marijuana a week. 4 or 5 dispensaries in Oregon, a dispensary in Oklahoma, and we're doing a facility in New Jersey, and we're doing pretty well with it.
All right. Well, that was no applause for that, I guess.
Yeah, it's not.
A little.
They're like, we'll overlook that part of your portfolio. I mean, okay, I'm sorry.
All right, we want to wrap up. We're up against the clock now, so we're going to do a couple things. First, we're going to thank Palmetto, who is just a great host, and we'll keep coming back here as much as we can. We want to thank South Carolina AARP for being a sponsor. We want to thank you all for coming. Please stay attuned to our advertising for this. Sign up for all our newsletters. We want to do this some more. We might take a break for the holidays, but I'll be back strong at the beginning of the year. And so what we're going to do now is what we're going to call this the lightning round, where we're going to give you some quick fire questions and just answer them in whatever fashion you want to.
Okay.
This will be the hardest question you faced today. On Twitter, you've made your feelings known about a wide variety of food opinions, from barbecue to grits. Most recently, you took aim at pumpkin pie.
Yes.
What's wrong with pumpkin pie?
Pumpkin pie is a fraud. I mean, there's nothing worse than going to someone's house thinking you're going to eat sweet potato pie and you taste pumpkin. I just find that to be... No, I think pumpkin pie is I don't like pumpkin pie. I don't like candy corn. I just think I think the way you should eat candy corn is to open it and throw it away.
Well, excellent. Thank you for answering. That was the toughest one of the day. So, who is the favorite, and who is going to win the Democratic race for SC governor, where the leading candidates are Joe Cunningham and Mia McLeod?
Well, you asked an honest person a real tough question here. That's a tough question. Who's going to win between Joe and Mia? I think it's very difficult for, if I had to bet today, I would say Joe would win. I would not be surprised, though, if Mia won. And I tell Mia every single day she's the underdog in this race. Joe is going to run a consummate campaign because Joe is one of the best campaigners we've seen. And the story is yet to be told on what Mia's going to do. And so I have given money to them both, and I'm going to let them duke it out. There's no reason for Bakari Sellers to pick and choose between two friends. I'm going to let them duke it out. But I will tell Mia today that she's the underdog in this race. And I will also tell you that if Joe Cunningham wins, you have a good chance of anybody is beating Henry McMaster. Joe Cunningham has a better chance than I do of beating Henry.
Do you
That
believe,
was a really good political answer. You saw how I kind of weaved in and out and ducked and went all around. I don't even know if I answered it, but that's what you're going to get.
my head is in knots right now, trying to unpack it. Changing, over to CNN. Do you believe that CNN handled the Chris Cuomo incident correctly, and that he was advising his brother at the same time he was on the air and not disclosing
Now you're
it?
trying to get me fired. Who's going to come to these events anymore? I don't know. Chris is one of the, Chris is a big personality. And I cannot imagine what I would do if my brother was going through that. Did we handle it correctly? I mean, I wasn't in those conversations. I mean, I'm a commentator on the network, so I wasn't in those conversations. But I can tell you that Chris believes in the ethics of journalism and believes, and he will tell you whether or not he failed those ethics or not. But I also can tell you that he's learned a great deal from that situation. And if it was your brother or your friend going through it, would you advise him? The answer is probably yes. And he didn't cover the story while he was on air. Could we have done a better job? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Besides yourself, who is the most underrated TV journalist in the country?
I'm not a journalist, Skylar. You know that. I get paid for my opinion.
And as a journalist, who would it be?
The most underrated? I love Abby Phillip, but she's not underrated anymore. She's getting the respect she deserves. Tamron Hall is amazing. It's probably Jennifer Berry Hall. She doesn't get nearly the respect at the Post and Courier she deserves. You like that answer? Oh. Got these two dudes up here. Jennifer must have been booked tonight or something.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. I hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll hope to see you again.
Thank you.